Hey guys, before we get going, I want to give a massive shout out to SeatGeek for sponsoring this video. If you don't know what SeatGeek is by now, then I don't know, I guess maybe you've been living under a rock. SeatGeek is by far the best way to get tickets to sporting events and concerts. It's an app that you can download on your phone. It is super intuitive to use. It lets you compare seats, compare prices. I've used SeatGeek probably close to 10 times by now. I've used it plenty of times to go to NBA games. It takes all of the pain and struggle away from having to make a decision on how to buy tickets or where to buy tickets. So if that sounds like something that's interesting to you, download SeatGeek right now. Use my promo code MDJ for $20 off of your first purchase.
It's hard for lower seed teams in the NBA to win in the playoffs. A lot of how the NBA is structured makes it difficult for upsets to happen. One of the biggest contributors to that is the fact that NBA playoff series are 7 games long. The more games in a series, the more likely the better team will win, and the harder it is for the lesser team to pull off upsets. Contrast this to the National Football League, where each playoff matchup is only 1 game, and you'll find it unsurprising that upsets are more common in football than in basketball. Previously on my channel, we already looked at one of the greatest upset Cinderella teams in NBA history, which was the 1995 Rockets, who managed to win the NBA championship despite being only the 6th seed in the Western Conference that year. In today's video, we're looking at the 1999 Knicks, who, like the Rockets, had a Cinderella story, but unfortunately not a Cinderella ending. However, they are the first and only 8th seed team in NBA history to make the NBA Finals. This is their story. 1998 was a chaotic year for the NBA. Michael Jordan won his 6th NBA ring and cemented his status as the greatest of all time. Well, at least according to most fans and media members at the time. But before the 1998-99 season would begin, the NBA needed to reach a new collective bargaining agreement with the Players Association. When the players, led by Patrick Ewing, met up with the league, they soon realized that there were major disagreements that they couldn't easily get over with. The owners of the teams wanted to lower the salary cap, while the players wanted to raise salaries, specifically salaries for those on minimum contracts. These disputes pushed back the start of the season, since you couldn't legally start playing games without an agreement first. Finally, on January 18th, 1999, the NBA and the Players Association agreed to a new collective bargaining agreement. The first game of the 1998-99 season, ironically, didn't happen in 1998, but rather on February 5th, 1999. In one of the craziest things the league has ever attempted to do, they crammed 50 games into 90 days, which meant tons of back-to-back games for teams and rarely more than a day's rest between games during this 90-day season. So right off the bat, we have an unusual season, not just for the Knicks, but for everybody. A consequence of 50 games, as opposed to the standard 82 games, is that the standings are less accurate of a reflection of the actual rankings of the team. That is, with less games comes more variance, and with less games comes a higher chance for better teams to be ranked below worse teams in the win-loss column. The stage was already set for lower seed upsets. Even without considering the circumstances of the league, the Knicks were already in a weird situation in 1999. Patrick Ewing, now 35 years old, was now entering the twilight phase of his career. To bring in some help and replace his production at the center position, the Knicks traded for Marcus Camby before the season, who had a promising rookie season in Toronto and already proved to be an elite defender, having led the league in blocks the season prior. Additionally, the Knicks brought in Latrell Sprewell, a dynamic, talented shooting guard with a short temper and plenty of off-the-court issues. This allowed the Knicks to part way with John Starks and Terry Cummings, 2 players that were way past their primes, as well as Charles Oakley. But with Patrick Ewing, Latrell Sprewell, Marcus Camby, Larry Johnson, Allen Houston, and a league-high payroll of $68 million, the Knicks were poised to be one of the best teams in the league. Additionally, their biggest obstacle, the Michael Jordan-led Bulls, had just disbanded. Michael Jordan has just announced his retirement, and Scottie Pippen went to the Western Conference, where he joined the Houston Rockets. Many Knicks fans believe that this was their year. The regular season didn't turn out very well for the Knicks. Patrick Ewing and Latrell Sprewell together missed around 20 games due to injuries, which was even more significant given the shortened season. The Knicks had trouble fitting in the new pieces since many players had gotten used to playing alongside John Starks, Charles Oakley, and other longtime Knicks veterans. Their head coach, Jeff Van Gundy, also struggled mightily in figuring out a winning formula. At multiple points in the season, it was reported that the Knicks were thinking about firing Jeff Van Gundy. These reports were later confirmed by President Dave Checketts, who admitted that they considered firing Van Gundy at multiple points during the season, and that they would have done so had Phil Jackson agreed to take over as a new head coach and accepted the Knicks' job offer. But Phil Jackson didn't, so Van Gundy remained the head coach for the Knicks during that season. With about 2 weeks left in the season, the Knicks were at 21 wins and 21 losses, having lost 4 games in a row and looking at the playoffs from the outside. There were only 8 games left in the season. Dave Checketts, the president, suddenly fired the Knicks general manager Ernie Grunfeld. After the firing, we learned that Grunfeld and Van Gundy had been at each other's throats all season long about how the team should play. Grunfeld, who made the decision to trade away the veterans and bring in Latrell Sprewell, wanted at least a more fast-paced offense, while Van Gundy, who wasn't happy that Charles Oakley and other veterans were being traded away, wanted to keep the team's playstyle consistent. The Knicks front office was an utter disaster, to say the least. Just think about this. You had the general manager and the coach fighting with each other, and then the president trying to get rid of both of them at the same time. Perhaps due to the firing of the general manager, Ernie Grunfeld, the Knicks managed to win 6 of their last 8 games and squeeze into the playoffs as an 8th seed with a record of 27 wins and 23 losses. Knicks fans, however, weren't all that happy about their late season push. They were expecting at least a top 3 seed given the payroll and given the talent, and they understood that 8th seed teams almost never make any significant noise in the playoffs. Yet somehow, someway, this mediocre team with the 3rd worst offense in the league would go on to surprise everyone. In the first round, the Knicks faced the 1st seed Miami Heat. The Knicks and the Heat had been longtime rivals all throughout the 90s. Their playoff series against one another were notoriously known for being some of the ugliest and most physical games during that era. It'd be too much of a stretch to say that the Heat were psychologically affected by their history with the Knicks, but it's not too much of a stretch to say that the history between these two teams had a significant factor in this series. Although the Miami Heat were the 1st seed, the Knicks were familiar with them, and because they had beaten them before, they were not scared of them at all. Back in 1999, the NBA first round series was only best of 5, not best of 7. And as we talked about in the intro to this video, the shorter the amount of games, the more variance this is. And a best of 5 series inherently makes it more likely for the lesser team to come out on top over the favorite team. One of the big deciding factors for this series was the underwhelming performance by Tim Hardaway. During the regular season, Tim Hardaway was the 2nd leading scorer for the Heat, but in 5 games against the Knicks, he averaged just 9 points a game while shooting 26.8% from the field and shooting 5 of 25 from 3. The series was tied 2-2 as the Knicks and the Heat headed back to Miami for the ultimate showdown in Game 5, which in modern terms is basically a Game 7. Now this turned out to be one of the most memorable and entertaining finishes to any NBA playoff series. With 4 seconds left, the Knicks were down by 1 with a sideline out of bounds. Allen Houston comes off of a pin down screen, goes to the rim, tosses up a floater which hits the front of the rim and bounces in with 0.8 seconds left, putting the Knicks up 1 and upsetting the 1st seed Miami Heat. The Knicks, after this upset, became just the 2nd 8th seed team in history to make it past the 1st round. In the 2nd round, they were matched up against the Atlanta Hawks. This series, however, would be far less competitive than the 1st round. The Knicks, with their stifling defense, limited the Hawks' leading scorer Steve Smith to just 27% shooting from the field throughout the series. Even Dikembe Mutombo, a center, was held to 38% shooting from the field. As a whole, the Hawks shot only 31% as a team during this series. And on the other hand, the Knicks had figured out much of the offensive problems that plagued them during the season. Latrell Sprewell and Allen Houston combined to average 40 points per game as they led the Knicks to a 4-0 sweep over Atlanta. In the conference finals, the Knicks were matched up against another rival, this time the Indiana Pacers. The Pacers had swept both their 1st and 2nd round series that year and were 7-0 and were looking to make the finals in the post-Jordan era, same with the Knicks. Unfortunately, bad news came for the Knicks right after Game 2. The Achilles injury that bothered Patrick Ewing all throughout the regular season and the playoffs had suddenly become unbearable. He was ruled out for the rest of the playoffs. But on the bright side, Ewing's injury meant more playing time for the young Marcus Camby, who put up 3 straight double-doubles in Ewing's absence. The MVP for the Knicks was undoubtedly Larry Johnson, who not only averaged 16 points per game on very efficient splits, but also made one of the craziest game winners in NBA history, which is not an exaggeration at all. In Game 3 at Madison Square Garden, just a day after Ewing was announced to be out, the Knicks found themselves down 91-88. The ball was inbounded and tipped, and eventually caught by Larry Johnson. Johnson held the ball a couple steps away from the three-point line, pump faked, caused his defender to jump, and then sink a pull-up 3 as the ref blew the whistle for a 4-point play. Larry would then go on to make the extra free throw and win the game for New York. This is the famous 4-point play game winner. Yet another miracle for the Knicks. In the NBA Finals, the Knicks ran up against the San Antonio Spurs. The Spurs were coming off of an 11-1 record in which they swept the Lakers in the second round and the Blazers in the conference finals. This time, there would be, unfortunately, no miracles left for New York, as a 22-year-old power forward named Tim Duncan, in just his second year in the league, put on an absolute clinic, averaging 27.4 points, 14 rebounds, and playing 45 minutes per game, leading the Spurs to a 5-game victory over the New York Knicks. In the end, the Knicks didn't have the fairy tale ending that they wanted. Some of the Knicks players were quite disappointed. Latrell Sprewell said after the series that it was, quote, all for nothing. On the other hand, Jeff Van Gundy, who very much avoided getting fired because of this miraculous playoff run, said, "As disappointed as I am in the result for our guys, because I was really hopeful for them that it would work out, they stand for, to me, a lot of things that should be taught about the NBA in team basketball. When it was tough going, they didn't point fingers of blame at each other." To end this video, I'll leave a question off for you guys to discuss in the comment section below. Do you think that in our lifetimes, which is let's say the next 50 years, we'll get to see another 8th seed team go to the NBA Finals? I personally think that barring the crazy unusual circumstances that we saw in 1998, and just the succession of miracles that the Knicks had to have on their side, and plus the fact that in today's NBA, the first round is no longer a best of 5, it is a best of 7, and that's probably not going to change. I would bet against us seeing an 8th seed in the NBA Finals in the next 50 years. Now, of course, given enough time, right, assuming the NBA keeps going on for maybe centuries upon centuries, with enough time, anything can happen. Like, eventually, if the NBA keeps going on, we'll probably see an 8th seed team win the NBA Finals. Just purely by probability, that's eventually going to happen, given enough time for crazy things to happen. But the question is for you, do you think in the next 50 years, we'll see another 8th seed team in the finals? Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. I do sometimes NBA stories like this. I do a lot of NBA stats videos. I do a lot of analysis, some trade breakdowns, all sorts of NBA stuff. Subscribe to the channel so you can stay tuned for that. In the meantime, when I'm not posting videos, you can find me on Twitter at MarkDJohn or on Instagram at the same handle. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time.